A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. I recently had the great honour of doing some interviews with Professor Dr. Thomas Rau, and today he's the head of the clinic in Sonnenberg in Appenzell. And one of the resident doctors who works there is Alexandra Kotthaus, who is here today to address a very important topic with me, namely, how do I feed my tumour? Or wrong nutrition makes us sick. And I can't do enough broadcasts about it here because these are all things that we could have a firm grip on at home, if we are aware of it. We're about to start, so stay tuned. Now, I'd like to warmly introduce you, dear Alexandra Kotthaus. A very warm welcome.
Thank you, Alexander.
It's nice to be able to talk to you about nutrition. It's a bit unusual with very few doctors sitting here. I can talk about nutrition. They're mostly from different areas, nutritional advice and so on. How did you actually combine medicine and nutrition for yourself?
Actually, it started even before I started studying medicine that I was interested in. My first attempt, that was when I was 19, I thought, well, I want to become a vegetarian now. And that wasn't easy at all. That was a quarter of a century ago. And it wasn't as easy then as it is today. Back then, there wasn't a choice of vegetarian or even vegan products. And then I only did that for a very short time. I don't even know exactly how long, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And I thought, no, it's just side dishes. That doesn't really make you satisfied. I then tried the whole thing for another 17 years. Until, well, during that time, I already ate only little meat. The animal products were reduced anyway, until I went completely vegan for a while. I don't do that anymore in that strictness. Then children came along, and with the children, dealing with nutrition was extremely important again, because I wanted to do everything particularly well. It was clear to me early on that if I feed the children well, then I'll give them something good to take with them later in life. So they are supposed to build up good bones, build up good substance, that they can stay healthy for as long as possible.
Now, you just said bones and children. There are always these famous sentences from advertising. You have to eat a lot of calcium, then you have hard bones and good teeth.
Yes, it also depends a bit on the overall composition, not just on the absolute amount of calcium. You can't just leave it at that. Back then, I still actively experienced it. They said milk makes tired men perk up. There used to be stickers on the milk. I can still remember it. And now we know that that's not true. We know too, dairy products can have side effects, but as far as toddlers in particular are concerned now, it's just also important that they are breastfed if it is at all possible. I always say it like this: those who can breastfeed should do so, and those who are really unable to, that's why it's good that there is milk, but it's not that easy to replace breast milk either.
And then don't necessarily take the cow's milk.
Exactly, of course, that's a topic now. That could be explored in depth. Of course, it also depends on how old the child is and with which other foods this could be substituted with. But basically, it is possible. And as I said, it's not just about the pure calcium intake. It's also about not working against it. And I don't acidify the body, that the calcium is not released from the bones again, because I need it as a buffer base. It is also very important for small children that I include a lot of fruit and vegetables in their diet, and maybe offer a piece of fruit instead of a cracker as a snack.
This is still the first show where we try to create such a grid. I think we can really discuss an infinite number of topics for each other, which we will do. It just has to be said. It's important. I remember Hippocrates saying, let food be your medicine and medicine your food.
Exactly. This was repeated by other physicians in the 19th century as well. But that's true. I also tell my patients that I'm trying to do it like Hippocrates. The dietetics comes first in recovery. And at that time, dietetics did not mean diet, as we use it today, but it meant nutrition and also a way of life. That the aim was to bring the patient back to a healthier lifestyle and diet. And I also tell my patients, the better they eat or the more they follow my recommendations, the fewer pills I prescribe them. Because with the right diet, I can get a good amount of many herbal components, which can then sometimes replace a pill. So nutrition can really become our medicine again. That's how I would most likely put it. And Hippocrates also said, only after that, when these things have been settled, should you take medicine. And he had a completely different understanding of medicine than we have today.
Those were still plants.
Exactly.
And today we have chemical products, but even this first part has actually completely disappeared from our consciousness, that we could actually try to make the milieu strong enough through food that a disease or a pathogen or a bacterium is ultimately brought back into harmony by the milieu, instead of just shooting at the pathogen.
Exactly. So that is a tremendous potential. But nowadays, not that easy anymore. Because we simply have to say there are so many more influences that play a role today. Diet is simply the basis of therapy. But once the disease has developed, then it often needs a little more support. On the other hand, if you look at studies that now only work on diet, you can really partially heal a large number of patients, but also ease symptoms. For example, there's a study on depression that accompanied a patient group with good nutrition for 3 months, so they cooked together with them. Another group received the same kind of social attention, that you couldn't say now this is the human attention or interaction that brought about the differences in the groups. But you could say that after this time in the cooking group, the effectiveness was as strong as in an antidepressant, while this did not happen in the other group, the antidepressant effect. And I think that these are very exciting approaches.
Extreme, but the truth is, even today, you're often left alone when it comes to nutrition. A diabetic doesn't know how to cook when they have diabetes. A cancer patient doesn't know how to cook when they have cancer. And that's why we called the topic of today's programme, How Do I Really Feed My Tumour?
Exactly. It's often simply said that one does not want to take away people's quality of life. Eating is very, very closely connected to quality of life, pleasure and joy. And the fact that it's just being said that they shouldn't change their lives, it should stay that way. And you try to work against it with other things. Anti-diabetics, so remedies against too high blood sugar.
I understand that sentence you said. I think that's a good, legitimate approach to say they should enjoy life. But at the end of the day, by enjoying this food, I'm actually making my illness, even worse.
Exactly.
Of course, I'm often totally exhausted after this wrong diet and need to go to sleep because the insulin is skyrocketing, right? That can't be the solution.
Exactly. That's a very important point that you picked out there. It's the way we're conditioned. We can actually question, are we really conditioned the right way? Aren't we confusing enjoyment with something else? Or does healthy food have to be untasty? I think we should also think again as a society as a whole. How species appropriate do we actually live? And is what we call pleasure really pleasure? And on the other hand, what we eat every day of course, plays a role. If I really say it now, I tell my patients it depends on the severity of the illness. A cancer patient who starts treatment should, of course, eat very strictly and healthily if possible. A patient who's gotten well or has hardly any symptoms, I usually say, you know what? Try to follow the diet as strictly as possible and as long as possible until you are fit, and then make hay when the sun is shining. Easter, Christmas, birthdays, if you get an invitation, fine. But please make sure you don't make every day a holiday. And that's what a lot of people do. It used to be like that. There was a Sunday roast, and you didn't have meat every day, or even ate meat at several meals a day. And maybe to get back there a bit and developing this awareness that eating is not just enjoyment. Although I would like to emphasize again at this point, healthy food is delicious. And if it doesn't taste good, you have to season it differently.
Well, that's it. It's a bit like the reward principle. You come home from work and you have to reward yourself. That is, via the food. I once went through a phase where I treated myself to a cognac in the evening. It was delicious. At some point it was every day, the cognac in the evening. I stopped that now because, well, it wasn't healthy at all. But this reward principle was behind it.
Exactly. I advise more or less individually. Now, if someone feels like certain foods or has a craving for certain things, I'll give them tips on how to do it. Someone who likes to eat very hearty, there are just a few things that feed that savoury taste bud so that you can let go of unhealthy foods more easily. Of course, sugar or sweets are often a problem, or many workplaces have a bowl of sweets ready to hand in the way, and then you might just reach in there when it's stressful. I know that well from the hospital. And then I used to think, actually, you're wrongly conditioned, but I think it's actually more complex than that. In fact, when we're stressed, sugar calms us down. Even the quality of sugar plays a subordinate role. I can also bring down my stress levels by eating a regular white sugar candy. But now it's like this. If I use white sugar and do it more often, I have permanent side effects. If I do this with healthy sugar, I can do this with fruit, then I can regulate my stress level and also my adrenal glands much better in the long term. Then you get into the subtleties of nutrition, so you can't really say carbohydrates are inherently bad. So if you look back over the last 20 years, first the fats were bad, then the proteins were bad, now the carbohydrates are bad. But you shouldn't see it that way. It has a quality. It's not about the thing itself, it's about the quality, from fats, from proteins, from carbohydrates.
Before we really get into the tumour stories, I just found out there is a Dr. Coy, and he dealt a lot with sugar. There's a lot of sugar out there, and they're not all bad.
Exactly.
Galactose, isomaltulose, trehalose, I don't even know what it all is, but I'll invite him on my show. It's very interesting to talk about such sugars, that you really don't have to do without everything, but you can do it differently.
Exactly.
In the vernacular, we know stevia and maybe erythritol with side effects. Good. Now to your clinic, you have a very, very special food culture. You work with Tibits restaurant, right?
Exactly, that's right.
Where they work purely vegan?
Exactly.
That is, of course, very special.
That's very special, that's right. And the philosophy that is lived in the restaurant is a mixture of what we bring, what we want for our patients, and what Tibits brings with it. The Tibits also has its own philosophy. It's important for them to use regional, seasonal, sustainable products. And they are strictly vegetarian or vegan. And we are actually not strictly vegan, but I would actually prefer to use another word for it. The word plant-based. So it's just a plant-based diet. It is important, and this is the largest part of the menu, to eat fruits and vegetables. I do allow my patients high quality animal products, depending on the illness, even meat. And that is out of the question for the Tibits restaurant. So for them, vegetarian, vegan is in the foreground. And so it is now a vegan restaurant. It's also a strictly vegan restaurant. So there's no honey, so that's special. And in the beginning, it was a small change. And now I would say we actually have a buffet. And in the evening, a four-course menu that is quite presentable in the truest sense of the word. So that's a feast for the eyes.
Yeah, I know the Tibits. I've seen it before, and it all tastes divine. I can't believe how long they've worked in the kitchen. The question arises again and again, what can I really do as a patient at home? Do they also learn a little something when they stay with you at the clinic? Let's say a cancer patient, do they learn within the clinic what they should and shouldn't eat in the future?
Well, down in the restaurant, they see what they can eat, that they have an experience what they can eat, that they can also experience that they get full and that it is delicious. They get nutritional advice in our department. And I always equip my patients with a few, I always say, first-time recipes, that they don't stand there empty-handed. How do I do it? That's all well and good. I'm not allowed to eat any of that anymore, and I should eat a lot of that. But what does that look like in practice? And I always say, my children are grown up now, but I was a working mother. And it was always very, very important to me that the focus is on nutrition and that my children eat healthy food. And over time, I became very inventive, and it had to be somehow feasible in everyday life. And I am happy to pass these tips on to my patients. For many people, it is hard not to eat bread. And meanwhile, I found a bread recipe which is quite sure of success, which also looks like bread and tastes like bread. And it's gluten-free. And I've baked a lot of very strange breads myself in my life, and for a while I had also completely given up that it's possible to make delicious, but if you want to eat bread, if you want to dip something like a baguette in dip, or think you need your bread in the morning, there are solutions for that.
Exactly.
And I also say, if you have a favourite dish and you don't want to give it up, please tell me. I have an idea for almost everything. We'll figure it out. All in all, we haven't been in Sonnenberg for very long, and we are also planning to offer cooking courses in the restaurant. And there will also be a nutrition workshop.
It's extremely important that the patient knows, maybe even the life partner knows, what the spouse or wife who suffers ultimately are allowed to eat and what not. And what is missing here is what a cancer patient is not allowed to eat. What should they try to give up?
Gluten. I just said it briefly. Gluten is actually multifaceted. You can do these antibody tests that it is said that there are immunological reactions to certain products. But that's only a small part of why you shouldn't eat this. When we do these tests, we see we just have our usual suspects, eggs, dairy, gluten, where most people react to it. With the other things, it's a lot less. But these things also have effects outside of this reaction. For example, it's like this. Especially with wheat, which is very cultivated and processed, that you can say the gluten molecule in wheat is no longer the gluten molecule it was 70 years ago. Because of the fact that the wheat, I didn't even know that for that long, the wheat is grown to the same level so that the combine harvester can harvest it. The yield is higher so that it can harvest better. The plant is cultivated in many ways. And so the gluten is no longer gluten. We get pastries to go on every corner. That we eat about 600% more gluten overall than we did 70 years ago. And it has a different quality. The thing is that gluten loosens tight junctions in everyone. That means tight connections between the cells in the intestine, that the intestinal cells are really tightly packed. The characteristics are not the same for everyone, which is why it is possible that there are people who have the feeling, that doesn't bother me at all. But I would still advise a really sick person, like a cancer patient, against it. Conversely, someone who has cancer usually no longer has intestinal cells that are close together. So I would really play it safe and say no. Please don't eat gluten. Wheat is still the most cultivated type of crops, but I don't recommend the other gluten-containing ones either.
Einkorn or ancient grains. The name sounds so unspoilt, but is it also cultivated?
It might not be 100% gluten-free.
Still gluten.
Let's say someone who doesn't have anything or doesn't have such a bad illness and then eats it, then we'll talk about something else then for a cancer patient. The other important ingredients are dairy products.
Indeed. Cheese too?
Yes, cheese too.
The Swiss have to stop listening now.
Yes. Dairy products and eggs, that's what I always explain to patients. It's just baby food. Babies of a different species are supposed to grow out of that.
So quick hormones and so on.
Exactly. And that's also what I get when I eat it organic.
But if I ferment that by making cheese, I have in the fermentation process, isn't it better then?
No.
Too bad. Okay.
No, but I have to say that it's often the case, especially when you leave out dairy products. You see lots and lots of quick improvements. Also, patients who come with chronic pain or chronic sinus infections. So you can also see success very quickly by leaving out the dairy products. I used to have a patient who was prone to boils. And he came regularly to the family doctor's office to have them pricked and work on them. And then I told him, couldn't you just leave out the dairy products? That was some years ago. Then he did it, and then I didn't see him again so soon. I once had a patient, still when I was working as a family doctor, who had pain, chronic pain, had already walked from pillar to post, and we have done the same, really just omitting dairy products. She came back 4 weeks later and said, I'm completely pain-free. It's not always that easy, but it's sometimes quite impressive.
I once read a study on acne. Acne, a group of people who really cut out dairy products, and the others kept eating it, and that was compared, and the success was 100%. Then I thought, it's not possible. How many young people suffer from acne, and nobody tells them what to do? It's really sad. Well, we're still with the cancer patient. So sure, we omit the dairy products, we omit the wheat, and now...
And the eggs?
Of course. Aren't there differences? I've wanted to ask this question 100 times. There are chickens that have it really nice. They can really be outside, they're in nature, they're allowed to eat grass and so on. And then we have these battery chickens, or really inferior chicken quality. And those eggs... Are we talking about each egg that we should leave out, or are there differences?
There are differences. There are serious differences, definitely. We know that, but I'm not done yet. Of course, you know that an organic egg has much less cholesterol and LDL cholesterol than a non-organic egg from an unfortunate animal that maybe received concentrated feed and no natural food. Nevertheless, it remains baby food. I keep having this information in the form of hormones, growth. And that's something I don't want at all with a tumour. Certain components from eggs, and they are naturally in the egg, so also in the organic egg, are also in the intestine, processed by certain gut bacteria into toxic products that simply use up antioxidants in us as well. Then we still have the problem with eggs that vaccine viruses are usually bred on protein. If they are then taken from the carrier substance, the protein, it is usually not or not always highly pure. This means when a child is vaccinated, it already gets these protein components. Parental means out of the intestines, so injected into the muscles rather than through the intestines. And because of that, I don't have this natural barrier of the intestines where the body can defend itself against, but I have an immunization there. So that means I can still create an immunization against eggs. As I said, it's really complex why you shouldn't eat certain foods, but others a lot.
Good. I mean, if the horse has bolted, then there's no point in discussing that the path has to be followed consistently to get out of this vale of tears. But if you look at the viewers and preventively talk to healthy people, would you then still say, strictly leave out, what was it called again in the wheat?
Gluten.
Oh, gluten. Yeah, gluten. Should they omit all the eggs and cheese, or just in moderation?
I would reduce it significantly. It is also the case in Switzerland that one can say that 60 or 70 years ago there were considerably fewer dairy products and gluten consumed than today. We have lost measure, and quite often it is not being consumed in the right quality when it is consumed. It's just that after eating certain foods, including eggs, dairy products, it is possible that I can still determine a growth factor that has the name IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor in the blood up to 2 weeks later. This is also something that is released parallel to the insulin, so with sugar consumption, for example, it can be measured. It can be elevated for these 2 weeks. So if I'm kind of prone to inflammation, to cancer, to autoimmune diseases, I can fuel that with that. When I'm healthy, it's different. The problem nowadays, as I said before, nutrition is a very important thing. This is the baseline, but is more complex. Nowadays, we also simply have a certain toxic load in our environment. This means I can no longer heal everyone through nutrition alone. I also have to detoxify. Today we find around 400 different toxins in umbilical cord blood of newborn children. And these toxins settle in different places in the body. They can cause that our enzymes, including our detoxification enzymes, for example, work more slowly. They can attach themselves to the DNA, which may lead to incorrect readings and can promote cancer. This can accumulate in our cell membranes and lead to malfunctions. And since we are more or less all affected by having some toxins in us, it makes sense for all people to eat as well as possible.
To detox.
And detox regularly.
Even if you are healthy.
Yes. If you want to grow old, I hear more and more often that I don't want to grow old at all, I just want to be healthy to the end, even if you don't get very old. If you want to grow old and be healthy, then you have to start doing something about it as early as possible these days.
Can you also find out what kind of detoxification you have to or should do? For example, chelation at your clinic.
We do tests that we look for specific toxins. We check the blood in the dark field. There are different possibilities to find something.
And if we now go very broadly again, even if the airtime is already over, every patient who is somehow confronted with an ailment should examine their nutrition and check with biological physicians which diet they would have to implement in relation to their illness.
Yes, definitely. So, the diet is the be-all and end-all in therapy. I can get at least a symptom relief. Through diet alone, for up to 80% of patients, sometimes symptoms go away with diet alone. Proper nutrition works synergistically with the remedies we give. If I'm going to give vitamin C in pill form, but eat a lot of natural vitamin C or add rose hip, then I also have a better absorption and metabolism of this vitamin C pill, for example. So it's just a synergistic effect that I have with nutrition. And I think maybe some people don't always fully realise that. Everything I am, from my hair to the tips of my toes, has previously passed through my mouth. Everything my body is made of has passed through my stomach before, is made of food. The body can do wonders. This means that it can keep you alive for a very long time, even if you eat food that is not quite as good. On the other hand, the better the quality I offer it, the better it can take care of and repair this wonderful framework.
Sometimes we look after our car engine almost better than what we pour into ourselves. But thank you very much, dear Alexandra Kotthaus, for telling us that clearly again. I find it a bit sad that patients are often left to their own devices and told, do it, have a good time. Instead of saying, stop, you have to start here, rigorously, in order to get back to your feet very quickly. That became clear today. Thank you very much again for that.
Thank you, Alexander, for the interview.
Yeah, and now I also wish that you find the right diet and implement this important contribution into your everyday life so that we can all be healthy without medicine, if possible. Get healthy or stay healthy. And by medicine, of course, I mean the topic of nutrition. All the best. See you next time.